Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pals Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hello.
And today we're going to be reviewing Princess Bride. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. While homesick in bed, a young boy's grandfather reads him a story of a farm boy turned pirate who encounters numerous obstacles, enemies, and allies in his quest to reunite with his true love. So in this movie, we have as cast Cary Elwes, who plays Wesley. We have Mandy Patinkin, who plays Inigo Montoya. We have Chris Sarandon, who plays Prince Humperdinck. We have Christopher Guest, who plays Count Rugen. Wallace Shawn, who plays Vicini. We also have Andrew the Giant, who plays Fesky. We have Fred Savage, who plays the grandson. We have Robin Wright, who plays the Princess Bride or Buttercup. We have Peter Falk, who plays the grandfather. We also have Peter Cook, Mel Smith, Carol Kane, and Billy Crystal. And the director, Rob Reiner. So to start off, we're going to go down my pros. So in my pros list, I have the story is simple, it's hilarious, it's just made for kids who are into Disney stories, but it has a little bit of a teenager feel to it, just in case you're growing older and you're like, I'm not really into Disney stories because of the little rebellious stages. But this is a humorous take on fairy tales. It has a really excellent caliber of the cast in this film. It's amazing. Come on. And we have Andrew the Giant. That's inconceivable. Okay. So, I mean, what other movie have you seen Andrew the Giant in? You know, this is kind of the only one I've seen him in. And let's not forget that all the lines in this film that you can quote, like, for example, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Or give us the gate key. I have no gate key. Fesky, tear off his arms. Did you mean this key? So lines like that, there are incredible to quote, especially all the lines of Miracle Max, the guy who revives Wesley. His lines are hilarious. He's played by Billy Crystal, and this is when Billy Crystal was like really hot back in the day. It's just hilarious that all the one-liners, and I'm pretty sure that there's stories behind these scenes and stuff like that. Now let's go into talk about the action scenes. Let's talk about the sword fighting scene between Wesley and Inigo. It was an excellent choreographed scene, and I'm pretty sure, and I think I read it, that they practiced for months in order to get that scene down. And it's amazing that they only used one stunt double during the whole scene, and it was just for, I think, for a flip or something. Other than that, it's just them two going at it and just dueling themselves, and they did it right on. To me, it was my favorite part of the movie, I would say. As now for my cons, for the film, it didn't age as well as others. It kind of lacks the spark that it did back in the day, especially for nowadays, for this generation. They might not enjoy it as much as we did, but if they give it a try, I think it does grow on you, even if it's nowadays. I feel that some of the things that this film has to offer, like for us when it came out, it was amazing, but now revisiting it, it does lack a little of the elements that we see with modern movies. I feel that in some sense that the behind the scenes stories are more interesting nowadays than the actual storyline of the film. What I mean is, if you take a storyline from a movie from the present time and you compare it to this movie, Princess Bride is a straight line kind of story. It doesn't really have twists and turns and or really elaborate for audience from nowadays. And I think this is really interesting if we do compare movies like this from back then and now. Back then it was kind of simplistic. It was just, put the characters there and just concentrate on the actual dialogue. So for me, the dialogue actually makes this movie. It's a really excellent movie based on dialogue versus action. There is action scenes here and there. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Touly and see how he saw this film.
This film, I still appreciate it to this day, having watched it yet again for this review. The thing that really stands out to me is the presentation of a narrative within a narrative, with the grandpa telling the grandson the story, and how the grandson felt about this story being read to him from the start, and how he became more and more interested or more angry at times or more sad, depending on what was happening throughout the story being read to him. To me, things like that you don't see too often, because it's sort of something that you should mentally be experienced while watching a film If you're just seeing, if this happened to like the princess, then what's gonna happen to her now, or what's gonna happen to Prince Charming or whatever. These are things you're constantly thinking, but the boys kind of acting at this window for us and just making it apparent that, you know, these are sort of some of the thoughts that most likely as an audience you're thinking when you see these sort of stuff. And I appreciate it for that aspect, because it just makes the moment, it kind of in a way makes us appreciate films or anything that tells a story, whether it's a play, a TV series, whatever medium you want to throw out there. It helps remind us to, even if you don't like the way maybe some of these stuff are being portrayed, elements that we would consider what makes a piece of work good, maybe on a personal level. If you were to just throw all those stuff away and just, you know, sit back and just say to yourself, you know what, I just want to know what's going to happen next, or this scene, it made me feel this way because, or I would have liked it to go this way because it just didn't seem right, or it doesn't seem fair, as at one time that the grandson said, and the grandfather was like, well, life isn't fair all the time. So, you know, I like these little tidbits that they threw throughout the entire film, you know, bring us back outside the realm of the story and into the real world, where we are constantly thinking about these stuff when we're watching these form of entertainment. So that I could appreciate, and it's the one standalone thing that I think has going for this film, like consistently throughout the film. If it wasn't for this aspect of the film, I would say that the absurdity of what was happening throughout the story, it would have been a little too much for me. The fight scene, that was great. Like Sam mentioned, the fight scene between Wesley and Inago, that was very well done. I enjoyed it, and everything that led up to it, where they were like using their offhand, and they revealed that they were both right-handed. Even the setup to the fight too, like them developing a relationship. It's like, oh, I'm a man of honor. I won't let you fall. I'm gonna use the rope to pull you up. And even Wesley just knocking him unconscious and not killing him at the end, and saying that he had no gripe with him, that he just had this thing he was on a mission to do. You know, so I like the storytelling, the relationship development between the two characters, you know, along the way. And they sort of attempted this too with the character that Andre the Giant was playing. Not to that extent, but you can see that Wesley's character, he had no intention of killing this guy either. Now, the guy played by Wallace Shawn, who Wesley's character tricked into drinking the poison, that guy, you could sort of say he deserved to die because of the way he was treating the other two, and how he had a motive. Like, the other two, they were just there doing their job because they needed a job, but they had, you know, some sort of history that they wanted to right wrong, particularly Inago, with the death of his father and him traveling the worlds and hoping to meet the man with the 6 fingers on the right hand. So these characters you could sort of root for, despite them going against Wesley initially, but definitely the character played by Wallace Shawn, for him to get what was coming to him, it was satisfying. And I'm pretty sure the grandson, who was experiencing this through the storytelling, he was probably, you know, cheering for joy as well, even though they didn't show that particularly at that moment. He did come to smile and whatever at certain scenes, especially at the end, where the grandpa stopped right before the end of the book, and the boy sort of realized, wait, is that it? This doesn't seem to be it. It doesn't seem conclusive. And the grandpa was like, well, there's a kiss, but I know how you feel about kisses. And he's like, you know what? The kiss will be fine. Go ahead, grandpa, and read. And he ended up reading that part from the story. So again, I kind of saw it more from like the kid's perspective, in terms of how the story that the grandpa was reading to him, how he came to appreciate it as it was being read to him. And just the appreciation that the kid had, how it developed, played a lot to how I saw this film. It wasn't necessarily just what was being read, because like I said, the film was pretty absurd. A lot of stuff were over the top. Even the torture scene that happened to Wesley, how much yelling he was doing, and how it was heard from such a far distance. Like, they made it seem like Buttercup was able to hear it back at the castle or whatever. So yeah, a lot of over the top, which is fine, but I'm glad that it sort of got played down through the seriousness of the reading being done by the grandpa, and how he was like, well, you don't want me to keep reading, I can stop, because you don't seem very interested right now, or you seem very angry or whatever, or do you want me to continue reading because you keep interrupting me? And the kid was like, you know, go ahead grandpa, go ahead and keep reading. So I love the interaction between the grandpa and the grandson just as much as, you know, some of these characters' interaction within the story. But then you can also attribute it to maybe how the grandpa was reading it, and maybe he added his a little extra flair to it to make it seem more comedic, because sometimes the reader does sort of portray how these characters are despite them being written a certain way already. So there can always be that, but I guess if I weren't considering that and just taking it as face value, then maybe this story did have some comedy in it, and Grandpa was just doing his best to portray that through his reading to the kid. Overall, I liked it. The only thing that really at one point made me thought, I don't really buy that, despite this being a fantasy realm where the story is taking place, is when Buttercup pushed Wesley down the hill, and for the hill to be that steep, like, I would have thought they would have died or suffered some sort of severe injury. Again, very absurd the amount of time they took to showcase both of them rolling down the hill like that and the sounds they were making. But for me, I was thinking, man, one of them should have like suffered like a broken leg or whatever. But again, the absurdity of the film made me like ignore it in the end. But hey, I'm glad that Wesley and Buttercup ended up being together at the end, happily ever after, and just glad that the kid now has the grandson has a new appreciation for storytelling as meaningfully as it could be. The grandpa ends the movie with the "as you wish" line that Wesley used at the beginning of the story to convey how he felt about Buttercup. So it's a very nice touch at the end with the "as you wish" line from the grandpa to the grandson.
I agree with you. I mean, I do see that we as the audience were Fred Savage and the grandfather's telling us a story, and we're kind of like a little too old for this, but as long as you sit through the story, it kind of grows on you. And maybe, like you said, the grandfather does add his little flair to it, tries to adapt it to his grandson's taste, and that's why we get that comedic feel to the movie. But I enjoyed the film, and I think it's due to the actors and how they portrayed their own characters, with jokes and lines and everything else they added to it. Because if you do go back and see it, each of the actors did add their own little spin to their character, and some of the actors actually have in interviews said that this was one of their favorite movies. Even Andrew the Giant, if you tell him what was the best part of this movie, he will tell you that no one looked at him weird, that everybody just saw him as somebody else, like another person. And coming from a guy who's really big, Andrew the Giant was really insecure about himself, and he had so much fun in this movie. I mean, it just brings joy to me when I see interviews that he had and talking about this movie, that this was one of his favorite times that he had and shared with these people. So I want to say basically that when I was watching this movie, I mean, the grandfather, when I saw this movie, I didn't know he was Columbo, but now that I started growing up, and then you see the TV and you see reruns of old shows, you're like, hey, that's the grandpa. And when I go back, I can't, watching Columbo, I can't really like separate the two, because I'm like, it just feels like he just got off a case and just went home and is reading the story to his grandson. But yeah, I believe that, like you said, that little extra touch at the end when the grandfather says, "as you wish," that's him basically saying "I love you" to his grandson indirectly, because his grandson is that kind of person who's like, "Oh, ew, grandpa, don't give me a kiss," or "don't pinch my cheeks." That's him. It's like, I'm too old, I'm not a kid anymore. But him saying "I love you" indirectly through the book and with the quote, I think it's really subtle, and the grandson does accept it. So I want to ask Touly one thing. I mean, there's rumors that everything is getting remade and stuff like that. So as for me, I don't want this film to be remade, because I think it will lose all the aspects that it has gained over the times. But maybe a sequel might be in order, but that's a huge step, and I really don't want to say that I do want a sequel or not, but I think I'm leaning more towards a sequel than a remake. So with that, I want to ask Touly to see if he either wants a remake or a sequel of this movie, and for his final grade of the movie.
If I want a remake of this film, well, I'm going to put it this way. If there was going to be a remake, then they would need to, or I would want them to tackle it a bit differently. I would say like a lot of the comedy that took place in this film wouldn't hold ground in today's time. Not to say that they wouldn't be funny or appreciated. I would say like by the masses of people who are new to these sort of stuff, they wouldn't appreciate it as much as maybe like if we were to watch it. They would need to kind of cater this more towards their new audience. So new sort of comedy that they would be able to relate to, a lot of pop culture references that they would relate to, and something that would bring things full circle back to like the current times, or like how you were mentioning all these one-liners or situations from this film and how it sort of played tribute to a lot of the things that we are seeing in today's time. Like, for example, for me, what happened to Inago at the end when he found the guy with the 6 fingers right hand, and how he was on the brink of death, but he found the will to fight and kill that guy by reiterating that this guy killed his father. It reminded me of stuff like from Game of Thrones, where there was actually this one character who sort of iterated this sort of line too, where he's like, this guy killed my family, and he kept on saying that over and over to kind of will him to keep fighting. So I think like if they're going to sort of do the remake, they need to kind of do these things, but in a way where it kind of relates to the current time, and that it might affect future presence of either, you know, its significance in like future films or whatever. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the storytelling between the grandpa and the grandson. It doesn't matter to me if it's still a grandpa or grandson, or maybe it's a grandmother reading a story to a granddaughter or whomever. Again, it just has to say contemporary with with modern time. Maybe the kid is on her phone all day or something, and they're trying to pry her away from it just for a moment, just to get her to read or whatever, just to go outside and play. And maybe through this storytelling, it sort of give this kid a new set of mentality that, you know what, I love my phone, but sometimes maybe I do need to get some fresh air, or go to the library, or something, some sort of meaning that would be relatable to today's time. That's how I would take it, though, if there were going to remake this film in today's time. Am I great for this film? I still like the film, despite it having been out for, I believe, this film came out in 1987. So, yeah, it's been a little over 30 years. So, I still just like it for the interaction between the grandpa and the grandson, which elevated the story itself, despite what was happening in the story, whether or not you thought it was too over the top or whatever. But even then, the fight scene was great. The one-liners, as Sal mentioned too. I would give this film, man, I'm on the brink of a 7.5 or an 8. You know what? I'm going to give it an 8. Why not? 8 out of 10 for The Princess Bride.
My grade for this movie is an inconceivable 8 out of 10 as well. So that does it for this review of The Princess Bride. Please join us next time when we review Caddyshack.
Well, in the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, au revoir, go fair.
Remember, click that subscribe button and follow us on social media. And remember, keep watching movies.